Hey YouTube, Do-It-Yourself Junkie 369 here today, and it is day 27 of our RV-10 build. The wife and kids are out riding bikes and playing in the sun instead of in here helping me with the aircraft. But still kind of a single person job at this point. I don't need help that often. So still working on the elevator and getting ready to do page 9. Step 3, and you may notice in the photo that the elevators and the rudder are still shown in red at the same time. That's because I haven't finished the rudder yet. I'm trying to get the elevator up to the step where I need to do the pro seal and do the pro seal on the elevator and the rudder trailing edge at the same time. So that's why that shows up in that diagram this way. And with this step, I've got to go through and dimple all these flanges for the skin. My hands are still kind of sore from yesterday, actually. Especially when I get to the wings, this is going to be pretty horrible. I still don't really want to spend $800 or more on a pneumatic squeezer. It seems like a lot of money, but I'm starting to question that decision. Although these gloves, just simple mechanics gloves, seem to be helping quite a bit. And if only I used them yesterday, I might be in better shape. I guess if my hands get too tired, I need to take a break, go out in the yard and rip out some dandelions. They're all coming up all over the place, and they haven't turned into giant seed bombs yet that the kids are going to blow all over the yard. But when I get to the riveting section, my rivet count is going to climb dramatically pretty much in one day because of how many holes in this thing get riveted. Okay, so when you're riveting, be careful with this C-frame or squeezer frame. Basically, when I went to go form this hole, the edge of the frame caught on this bent over portion of the rib here and bent it. So you'll want to make sure not to do that. Finally figured out why these are dimpled when I pulled them out of the package. They have to dimple them before they bend the flanges, otherwise you can't get in there with your squeezer and dimple dies. So real happy they thought about that and did it. Might be a little bit biased, but I think my dimples look better. Does seem to almost be under dimpled. So the next step is to scuff where the foam ribs are going to go and clean any residual mess off with acetone. Since I'm priming these, what I'm going to do is mark and tape those areas so they don't get primer on them. And then after I pull the tape off, after I'm done priming, I'll sand and clean that area with acetone as the last step. That way I don't get primer in that area when I'm priming, and if I put the tape down, it's going to leave adhesive residue anyway that I need to clean off with acetone, so I might as well do stuff in that order so I'm not having to clean it twice. Alright, with that out of the way, now we can move on to priming all the parts and starting to put them together. One of my favorite parts of the process. At this point I really need this hole drilled, so I guess I better run to the store and pick up a step drill. Okay, so back from the store, you need a step bit that will do a 5/8 inch hole in this spar. I've got a pack, 2-pack that also has one that goes up to 1 3/8 inches. I guess my thought process was it does some sizes that are different than that one, and just in case I need it, I won't have to run back and buy something separate. So we'll drill that. The other thing I haven't done is dimpled these for the number 6 screw. When I hit that step, it didn't specify what size that screw was, and I had to go and look that up, which I didn't realize that really the part number for the screw states what size the screw is. And so that's going to be a number 6 dimple die, just in case you're wondering, which I am still waiting for in the mail. So I can go ahead and dimple what I can on those and prime them, because a lot of people prime before dimpling even, so it won't be that big of a hassle to do that. And I'll just keep track of making sure I don't do anything that makes it impossible to install those nut reinforcement plates and the mounting plate that goes underneath it. So I haven't finished priming everything yet, but I figured while I'm waiting for primer to dry on other pieces, I can start putting these together. So we'll move on to step 2. Unless you have a deeper frame than this, the squeezer's not going to work in here. I just noticed, if you're wondering why I was unclecoing that I did not dimple the counterbalance skin. And then the other part that threw me for kind of a loop is use the same rivet on all of this, which means these front holes here that are getting riveted have to be dimpled as well for a countersink rivet. But in the instructions, and I went back and read this several times, it just says to dimple the top and bottom flange of those pieces. It never says anything about the front, unless I missed it, but I did read through it a few times, trying to make sure I didn't. But it was pretty obvious once I got to the riveting part that something had to be dimpled there for it to work out. And also in the counterbalance skin, it never specifies don't dimple any holes. Luckily it's not a big deal. to go in and dimple those holes now. Well, that finishes out step 3. That's 50 rivets to hand squeeze there. That was quite a bit. Which I could have bucked those rivets with the bucking bar and rivet gun, but it's just easier to get in there with a squeezer when you have flanges like that. So just a reminder, this was set up this way. It makes an important difference on my, or actually, like that. Means my plates over here and here. Okay, so real quick, just in case you're wondering why I put the manufactured head on this side and the shop head on this side, this spar here is just a little bit thinner than this plate here, so I put the manufactured head on the thinnest material going into the thicker material. Then also I knew these two were going to go into this nut plate, which is made out of steel, so it's even the stronger material that it's being formed on. And then as well, usually when you have a nut plate, something's going to get it screwed into it this side, so I kind of wanted the nicer part of the rivet facing towards wherever that attachment point is going to be, because I'm assuming you might be able to see it. Even though I call that the nicer looking side, I kind of like how shop heads look when they're done right. Those are some great ones right there. But anyway, that finishes out step 4, and we're moving on to step 5. Okay, so on step 7, we're riveting these elevator horns in place, and as much as I'd like the manufacturer head to be on the outside here, facing in, these are steel going into aluminum, so I'd rather have the manufacturer head back here on the aluminum side, and we'll put the shop head on the outside. We'll just make sure to do a professional job here on bucking these rivets so they look fantastic. As much as I hate squeezing rivets, it's real hard to get the rivet gun in there the way I want these to be riveted. So I guess I'll be switching over to the squeezer. Okay, don't think I have enough leverage here to squeeze 1/8 inch rivets with this thing. That kind of sucks. Oh, okay, that was a lot more work than I was planning on, trying to get that in there. Would have been a lot easier just to put all the manufacturer heads on the outside here. So, it doesn't tell you which way to do it. I was just trying to do it the way that I thought was best, and it turned out making it a lot harder than it probably needs to be. Okay, so I forgot to prime the skins, which is what I need next. So I'm going to prime those, and then I have to take a little while and wait for them to dry. So perfect opportunity for me to pause the video, go and mow my yard, which I've been putting off, and come back and continue work. And then I read ahead in the instructions and found a couple additional tools that I probably need, or I know I'll need before finishing the elevators. And that is a number 6 screw dimple die, which you need to do the reinforcement nut plates, which is a step that I skipped. A number 12 pilot cutter, which is a countersink for a number 10 screw, and a number 28 drill bit. There's a couple other drill bits, like a 27 and a 26 that you'll need, but it's not until you do the final assembly, which I'm not sure if I'm going to assemble everything or leave it separate so I can stack it out of the way easier and do the final assembly once I have like a rolling fuselage that I'm ready to put an engine on and get out to a hangar so I can put the wings on and do the final assembly in the hangar. Last step that I left off on, I had forgotten to paint the skins, and we were getting ready to attach by back riveting the reinforcement nut plates, which I need to dimple. So this was what I was waiting for the number 6 dimple die for. And I had actually tried to go to a buddy's house who's working on a Sportsman 2+2 or 2x2. It's a really fantastic looking airplane. He's almost done with it. And it'll be fun to go out and do some flights with him and another RV-10. And it seemed like every dimple die he had to use on his plane was either a number 30, a number 40, which is normal. Most everything uses that, it seems. But then no number 6 screws, all like number 8 and number 10, which was a bit disappointing. Another thing that's disappointing is this dimple die set will not fit into my squeezer. It looks like it'll fit if I just shave a little bit off this stem. So I guess I'll do that. And what it is I probably got, doesn't specify it on here, but the thickness of the die is probably too much. So it's probably completely my fault. Or actually, I know it's completely my fault. But from now on, I know when I'm ordering dental dies, I need to pay attention to the length of them so I don't repeat this problem. This cover plate needs to get dimpled to match. Here is one of the screws, and it fits flush. So it doesn't call out number 6 in the plans, but it does give you the screw size, and there's a, well, it doesn't call out the screw size in the plans, but it gives you the part number in the plans. And if you learn how to read the part numbers, you'll realize that's a number 6 screw, which took me a while to figure out. I had to go back and reread some stuff. And then the other part of this step that I skipped was dimpling all the holes for countersink rivets in the skin. And looking at this, unless your dimple dies are narrow enough, you'll probably want to dimple these 30-second holes first, so your dimple die does not squish down your number 6 dimple. Okay, so the steps were kind of confusing, and for step number 1, it says rivet the nut plates, which is what I'm holding in my hand, to the reinforcement plates, which is what I just got done back riveting to there. But it says, using the rivets called out in page 9-20. The only rivets called out in 9-20 are the ones that rivet the reinforcement plate to the skin. Then step number 2 says, back rivet the reinforcement plates, which is this, to the skin, using the rivets called out in the blow-up of figure 1 at the bottom of the page, which is actually showing the riveting of the nut plates here to the reinforcement plate. Luckily it uses the same rivets, but since I went to the wrong figures, I should have riveted these nut plates on first and then back riveted to the skin. Luckily, I think I can still back rivet these nut plates, but the key here is I won't be able to use my back riveting plate because the rivets, there's the thickness of the skin there, so the back riveting plate won't sit on the rivets. But I think I can put my bucking bar in here as a support for back riveting. And I'll be able to set it down inside this seam here so that it's actually, the rivet heads are actually resting on that tungsten bucking bar rather than having a thickness of the skin gap between the rivet head and the back rivet plate. That way the rivet won't set with the head sitting proud of the surface that it's supposed to be flush with. I don't know if I said that clear enough, but basically you have the overlap of the skin and the nut reinforcement plate, and there's this thickness here. So if you stick the black riveting plate under there, you'll have that thickness that the head will stick out on the rivet as you try to back rivet it. So by sticking the tungsten bucking bar wherever I left it at, along the edge of the skin like this, the rivets will be pushing on that bucking bar rather than sitting up against the back rivet plate and having the head protrude out of the reinforcement plate. Well, that attempt at it turned out absolutely horrible. Other option is to hopefully have a long enough yoke. I can just use the flush sets on the squeezer and take care of the problem that way. Yep. Luckily this yoke reaches, because that does a much better job than the bucking bar, which slid around and put a slice down the middle of the rivets, and then the back riveter, because of the threaded portion of the nut plate here, couldn't get all the way over the edge of the rivet and created a ridge there. It's pretty ugly, but it looks like the back riveter will reach, and with the flush rivet sets on there, it's able to install these nut plates, even though I managed to do this in the wrong order. And I'm guessing on the other one, when I install the nut plates, I'll probably end up using the squeezer on those as well, just due to the fact that how bad the back riveter did on getting over that rivet while it was on the nut plate. It's not a good method, and it'll probably always result in some pretty poor rivets. That was difficult. I'm glad it's over. So make sure you put the nut plates on the bracket before you rivet the bracket into the skin. And I'm definitely going to email Vans about those two steps because that's pretty confusing. I mean, it states what order you're supposed to do it in, but then the call outs to the pictures are to complete, they're swapped basically. The call outs that they're using are swapped. The first call out they're using should be used on step number 2. The second call out they're using on step number 2 should actually go on step number 1 to avoid anybody doing what I just did, which was basically working off the pictures and completing the steps in the wrong order. And if anybody was wondering what was going on, because of this flange here folded down, I couldn't get to this rivet with the squeezer or my bucking bar, and I was just running through different stuff that I had trying to reach that area and buck that rivet. And you guys might have noticed on the nut plates, I did not bother dimpling them. I tried to dimple one, and my dimples, I couldn't really crush the nut plate and dimple it. Partially because I would have needed to modify the dimple dies, flatten it out on one side to fit in here really well. The other part is because it's such a small area, I couldn't, and it's made out of steel, I couldn't really, it felt like compress it enough. And so it didn't, I don't remember it saying anything about it in the steps, so I went ahead and didn't dimple it. And I can't really tell that I didn't. It seems like the nut plates, as they got riveted down, kind of squished the aluminum dimple down just a little bit, and it's not really setting up off the skin at all. Actually, I can't see any gap between that and the skin. Now, I do have to drill out those two rivets I did the first time around. Fortunately, these two rivets, the heads are creased right across the center. So that's going to make drilling them out really difficult. The next step is to rivet the rear spar to the rib halves. And it appears that I got this double offset just in time, because when you go to rivet the top rivet, you're okay. But when you go to rivet the bottom rivet, you'd have to angle the gun. So having this offset allows you to place it like this and get that down there close without interference from the skin turning the gun at an angle, which would cause you to get a bad rivet. So just like that. Perfect. So it's a good thing I bought this when I did. I looked out. Unfortunately, somehow I forgot to paint the rear spar, so I'm stuck waiting for it to dry. So I already picked up the bag of rivets I needed and got we'll go through, cleco everything, and then rivet the top rivets first, and then go back and rivet the bottom rivets with that double offset. So I have everything set up. I'm just waiting for paint to dry. Okay, so I finished painting this rear rib, which I forgot. The next step would be to attach it, but while I was waiting for this to dry, I went out and worked on my car, and it's too late now to do this, so I have to do it tomorrow. But that ends this video. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed and you want to watch more of these as they come out. And thanks for watching.